This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 76, Summer PD Series number 3.
The waitresses and waiters, they were talking fast, which I wanted them to, and my kids were having to have grit and keep working through it. And so I think it just gave them a greater appreciation for people from different cultures, and just maybe knowing it can be a struggle when you're learning a new language. And
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I'm here with my two co-hosts, Mr. Matt, Love Your Local Rogers, and Mrs. Laura, Show 13 Boyd. So I am super excited to continue our summer PD series with you both. Just in case this is the first time you are listening to our podcast at all, we are abandoning our typical format, which Laura would have participated in a long time ago on show 13. Each and every week, we typically talk to unbelievable educators, amazing teachers. We hear the stories of their classrooms and their experiences. We connect with them. We find inspiration from them, and we see what they do that's so special that makes students love being in their room every day. So for this summer, we are moving in more towards a specific topic where we're trying to develop a professional development little series that teachers can learn from to motivate themselves to maybe make a change for the upcoming school year. So to continue our introductions, if this is the first time you're listening, I am a former fifth grade teacher. I moved into being a elementary STEM and gifted teacher, and now I serve as a secondary instructional coach for my school district in Pennsylvania. So Matt, why don't you say hi and give us your quick background, and then you can throw it to Laura.
All right, my name is Matt Rogers, and I am currently a fourth grade learning support teacher. I spent about 5 years as a learning support teacher, and now I'm a regular ed teacher, if you will, that I've been doing for almost nine years at this point. So all that to say, all in the same third through fifth grade range. So I'd like to consider myself pretty well versed in upper elementary at this point. So that's me. I'm also from Pennsylvania, and I'll turn it over to Laura.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura, and I am currently a middle school Spanish teacher in Tennessee. I teach 5th through 8th grade, and this is my 9th year. I love what I do. I love connecting with other passionate educators like Ken and Matt, so I'm excited for our show tonight.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Awesome. We're really excited to have you back, Laura. You were by far one of our most memorable guests. And as Matt and I talked about topics that we thought would be beneficial for teachers to hear over the summer, we developed this idea of really connecting our classroom to outside of the classroom walls, other educators, other professionals in our school, in our district, as well as the local resources that are around us that can really create empowering experiences for students. Last week, we talked with Rhett Oldham about the idea of One the World, which was taking our classroom and connecting it with people from, someone across the country and even around the world. And so now we're kind of bringing it back to this local idea where we can really tap into the expertise, the passionate professionals and individuals that are around us to create these greater experiences for our students. So, Laura, one of the things that really sticks out for me thinking back to when you were on our show last time is you took your kids to a restaurant. So can you kind of just give us a story of what that experience looks like, and then maybe wind back to the first time you ever thought about attempting this with your students?
Yeah, so great question. The first thing that I wanted to do with my students was obviously to expose them to the target language since I'm a Spanish teacher. So, really start with a lot of backwards planning. So, the goal was that I would take them on a field trip to our a little local restaurant about a mile and a half from school. And so then I knew that would be my end goal and that would be something that we'd work for every single day. And so it really took a lot of logistic planning, just like what day are we going to go? Is it going to be my seventh and eighth grade? Are we going to order like all different items? Are we going to have a set menu? What are the expectations for my students? How are we gonna like get on and off the bus, and like what time are they gonna go? And so just all of those small pieces, which are a lot to think about for educator, but I knew that like the moment that my students would be using the language in a real world context, that would be really powerful for them, because so many of them always ask, when am I going to use this? And so I just felt like it was really applicable. We were studying about food and stuff, and it would be way more culturally enhancing if I took them to a restaurant. So the first time we went was definitely an area of growth for me. I'll be very vulnerable about it. It worked out, but there was a couple things like I probably could have done better. Overall, they had a really good time, and that's what really mattered. You know, seeing the kids happy and talking, and the restaurant did a fabulous job hosting 28 eighth graders. So I'm super thankful for that. But there are some tweaks that I've finally figured out, you know, year 4 doing this. So I'm glad I stuck with it. And that's encouragement for all educators. Like if you're doing field trips and other things outside of your classroom, that it does take time to refine your practice. But the kids, you know, they're worth it. And that's really what matters. You just kind of can't give up on yourself sometimes when it gets difficult.
I totally agree with that. And I think, Ken, as we launch into this conversation, a lot of this comes down to um, what you are jumping into. And Laura, I think you mentioned this, and when you said this, it just kind of triggered the thought of, the first time had limitations, things didn't go perfectly, and the second time you try things, you know, you go through that same experience teaching curriculum. The first year you try it in one way, you process, and the next time you go to teach it, you make some adjustments. So a special opportunity definitely comes into that same realm as practice makes, progress, and it gets your preparation. There's only so much you can prepare for in these situations, but um, the idea of what could go wrong, at least in my opinion, it's tough to justify not doing it, but I can easily see why a lot of educators are like, oh, I'm so scared of how, my kids are going to go to this museum and they're going to have these expensive artifacts all over the place. And I see where they're at in my classroom. I can only imagine what they're going to do when I turn them loose in a museum or at a theater or whatever the case may be. But you'd be surprised. Trying something new in the classroom, outside of the classroom, the kids, for the most part, Ken, you might be able to speak to this, or Laura as well. The kids recognize it's a special opportunity, and that usually brings out the very best in them, more so than, I mean, definitely have your safeguards. Like arm yourself with as many staff members as your building will allow you to have, by all means, parent volunteers if that's allowed. But it's definitely something that you can benefit from um, with a little bit of structure.
Yeah, I agree with that. And speaking of parents, so the first time I did not have any parents because I was just a little bit nervous, like how I could manage the parents and the students and like the restaurant employees and myself. And then as the years progressed, I realized like having the parents there would be powerful because they're like part of the actual experience with their child. And to be honest, a lot of them probably acted better because their parent was at the same table. And that gave me more like leverage to be able to monitor all kids and like kind of delegate some of the responsibilities. And then I also felt like I was being a little bit more like open to like, hey, you can come on this field trip and then maybe you can volunteer again. So just like an open invitation. And then this year I just opened up to any parent depending on their schedule. So yes, I definitely think more people the better. And the kids, they know it is something special, so I definitely agree with that comment because it's not something we're doing every day, and they know they're representing our school. They're wearing our school shirts out in public, and so I think they know that like this is something special my teacher is doing for me, so I want to rise up to that higher expectation.
I completely agree about the students stepping up because, I think what you said, Laura, is, they're wearing the shirt and you just talk to them about, carrying that school pride or, just hearing the teacher talk that way. I think it connects in a different way with the students. So Matt, I'll disclose fully. I did not do anything like this in the classroom where I took my students to something local. I have a lot of examples that I want to talk about later when we talk about bringing local in. We did field trips, but one was to Gettysburg, which is about 2.5 hours away. So I don't really consider that local because we were going to a national park. And so I'm very upset with myself that I never really explored this idea. But have you taken any trips or have you done anything where you're bringing your students to the local? And if not, brainstorm right now. Where can you and how can you?
So the only one I can connect to is we have a nonprofit that partners with the local churches in our community, as well as all the school districts. Both the private and public in the local area, but predominantly our public elementary school is one of the hubs. And our district actually donated our old building to this nonprofit because they believed so much in the vision, and they transitioned from really being a nonprofit to being the community center that is utilized by all four of those dimensions. So we've done a ton where we pull those community members in. We haven't necessarily at my building of the district, gone to the facility, but a lot of our families go there very frequently. They have food pantries and, you know, um, different services for health or mental illness or, getting back on your feet, parenting. So that is one that they come into our building frequently as members of our community, and it's also one of our big fundraisers throughout the year. We may be raising food, or we may be doing a sock drive, or we may gather presents for families that are less fortunate, and they go Christmas shopping. So that's my biggest connection of bringing community in. Or I rode my bike from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Cincinnati, Ohio to Orlando, Florida. I did do it, to Orlando, Florida, and then to Atlanta, Georgia, in this mindset of a fundraiser for our district. I truly believe that the nonprofit we were utilizing and referencing through all of that directly impacted kids in my classroom. So that's the best example that I have to provide. The main thing that I would say, Laura, hearing your example, is all these times we talked about this a little bit with Rhett on a much grander scale of subject matter experts. Whereas, I'm talking to a meteorologist, I'm talking to a national park ranger focusing on geology, I'm talking to someone from medieval times, whatever the case may be, that and how it connects to my curriculum may vary. But the whole concept behind that really is taking what the kids learned and reinforcing that all that Mr. Rogers was teaching all year was purposeful or authentic and honest and true. And it's a huge reinforcer to know, or less, I guess the kids say, oh my goodness, yeah, there's a purpose behind knowing this besides just needing to know it.
Yeah, Laura, how would you say your students, when they went to that restaurant, how did their attitude towards learning language change the next day?
Yeah, so first of all, I noticed a lot more of them like displaying a lot of empathy because they realized like they are learning Spanish for the first time, and a lot of the employees, obviously, Spanish is their first language. So I think it just honestly gave them more like patience for actually someone else, which was really good to see because the waitresses and waiters, they were talking fast, which I wanted them to. And they, my kids were having to have grit and like keep working through it. And so I think it just gave them a greater appreciation for people from different cultures and just like maybe knowing like it can be a struggle when you're learning a new language and you just have to like not give up and maybe use some hand gestures sometimes. So I think they realize like us practicing every single day matters, and you can get results. And I feel like there was a lot of good nonverbal communication I was seeing, which that made me really happy as the educator, of course.
Yeah, that's really neat. So thinking about the opposite way. So we've talked more about, especially with your experience here, Laura, bringing the kids out to local. Now about bringing local in, and by local, I'm not just saying it has to be a business owner or it has to be someone in the community. Even talking about just other resources that are around you in your school can be really powerful. So recently, this past about 2 months, I've been working with a high school stat teacher on a project, and we brainstormed it together. We talked about ways to increase the amount of data that could be um, that the students could be exposed to, getting more students to complete surveys. And so it ended up being that his classes developed in teams. They developed a pitch to an administrator of a topic they thought that they should survey the student body. The principals had to pick the topic that they thought would be most beneficial, and then the class kind of ran with that. Well, leading into that, I did a lot of teaching with the kids on just more of technology pieces, how to set up Google Forms, how is the data going to look, how can you use pivot tables to analyze that. And then I recruited another coach who has a doctorate in social studies and has an extensive background in research. So he came in and did a presentation on how to do a research pitch, how to do a research presentation. We brought the math supervisor in to talk about how to form the questions. We brought all of these different experts, but we're not really experts, just different voices into the classroom. And you could see the students. Now, this is seniors in May, and they're like kind of engaged, which is a huge win when they're moments away from graduating. And so, so just thinking about this, bringing in these other resources, what are ways that, Laura, in the past that you've possibly leveraged the power of other professionals in your school or other local professionals in the community to come in and have an enhancement to your instruction?
Yeah, so I use our parent liaison and translator. Her name's Amelia. Is from Mexico. So she did a wonderful presentation about the Mexican culture. And I really just asked her, like, sent her an email, and I was like, hey, I know you're really busy, but it would be awesome for students to hear a native speaker and talk about your culture. You can talk about whatever you want, all in Spanish. I gave her like all these dates because I didn't want to get a no if it was just one time, and we worked out our schedules, and then she came, she delivered a beautiful um, presentation to the students. And so she was just like two classrooms down the hallway. So I asked her, and so I think that's something that the kids are going to look forward to every day. They like clapped for her and stood up for her, which I was so proud of. And they were just like glued to her. So that was really easy. And then she just left the classroom. So that was a really good way just to like bring someone else. And I know that they're probably like used to seeing me every day, so someone new just brings value. I have a strong partnership with our local mayor. Again, I just really encourage teachers just to send emails, pick up the phone, and call your local politicians, because what's the worst they're going to say? No. I've never, knock on wood, never heard a no. I might hear a no for an event, but then they'll say, hey, how about you send me some more dates? Or, they have other obligations too, and I know that. But he's been super instrumental with tons of things. He connected me to other people, which I think is another great reason to reach out to community people, because he told me about some other organizations. And so you just kind of have to like maybe put the first ask out there. But once you do, you really can network really well. And they want to support your kids because they're like serving in the district, obviously, where your students' families live. And then I always feel like whenever the visitors come, that's like the best day of teaching, because I can just kind of relax and just like circulate the room, and I'm not at the center of attention. And so the kids are always very engaged. We create thank you notes for our guests. We have pre-scripted questions. They're working on public speaking, and I think those are really good soft skills that maybe they wouldn't really practice with me every day because they're seeing me every day. So they've got to step up their game when like the mayor's in or the parent liaison. We did Zoom this year with our state senator, and that was really an awesome experience because they still had to learn, how to present themselves, talk loud and clearly, and he allowed them to ask anything, which I was super appreciative of. And he couldn't come in the classroom, but I just meet him in the middle, like just come on Zoom, like come on Teams, like you got to be flexible. But I feel like that's our strength as educators. You might not get the right day or time, but like just be persistent and professional. And I just feel like the results will come in. Like they want to help you.
So that kind of like jogged my thought process of Ken, your question of local resources in the book Frindle, which I don't know, Ken, if you've read.
Love that book.
I love, just absolutely love. Was it Andrew Clement? It always strikes me, very upfront. There's a comment where the principal will always make herself available for the press, and on their very best behavior, they'll be very available. Even if they are booked, they're going to make their time. And Laura, as you talk about that, I kind of hear, right up, yeah, it's a really smart idea for the senator or a local official to make time for kids. It is a fantastic opportunity for them where they're at the end of the day getting a PR opportunity. They are doing something that looks great for the local community, but for your end, it's actually super beneficial as, when you have an opportunity like that, you see the kids rise to the occasion and give their very best. And so you're not, when you talk about things like intrinsic motivation, it's one of my favorite educational, concepts. How can I turn learning to intrinsic motivation for kids as opposed to the rewards that I have to give to kind of pull them along? It's one of my fascinations. And I feel like when you create opportunities where kids are recognizing they need to bring their best, bring their very best, it's a fantastic thing. To kind of shift and go back, Ken, to your question, this past year, I realized that we were using a lot of outside resources for things like field trips and, guests to come in the classroom. And as an elementary teacher, we had subject matter experts in our high school. And so we have a state of the art planetarium. And one of our big concepts they have to understand is seasons and weather and all of the different um, components that go into that. Um, so my physics teacher that runs the planetarium built an entire show for the fourth graders, and we bussed over to see it. And we partnered that with our agriculture department that reinforced our food chain, food web, ecosystems unit through the living things that they have in the school that they take care of and all the different features. And you're just like, that is all within house. We knew the kids would need to run around, so our phys ed teachers had the kids in the high school create mini games for the elementary kids. It was just a win after win after win. And the kids didn't care that it wasn't this elected official or, they loved seeing the meteorologist and the green screen behind them, but they also looked at their high school neighbors as rock stars in that moment, being famous in front of all of their classmates. And I think that was an opportunity that I saw just leveraging an in-house field trip that cost the district. We were already going to go over for the planetarium that was already budgeted. So what did it cost the district? It didn't cost a sub day. All of the kids from the high school were creating activities for the kids in fourth grade. The main cost was an extra 2 or 3 hours worth of a bus rental. I think they can handle that when you see the experience and the exposure that they got throughout that year. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, you transitioned right into kind of what I wanted to highlight. So, Laura, you mentioned something super important that I want to reiterate is just email people, call them, ask them. We talked about with that Rhett, how do you get people to help you, or how do you find these people? You just start talking to people. You send them emails and you ask, and they will respond. They will get back to you for the most part. But it's a great way to make those connections. So we talked about going out to the local organizations, bringing local in. We talked about bringing other teachers, and Matt, now you're highlighting students and clubs and organizations, and this is something that really can go both directions. Initially, I feel like we always think, okay, how can elementary students benefit from the secondary students, because the secondary kids can be leaders for those younger students. So bringing in the leadership organizations or the community service organizations into the school. In my elementary school where I taught fifth grade, we always had we had 5 assemblies a year to celebrate our proud acronym, which was about traits that we wanted the students to emulate. And a lot of the times we would have former Siler kids come back to our school to either read a speech or to perform. We would have the high school dance troupe or the high school cheerleaders come down to do this big pep rally when we were in our phase of being optimistic and being super upbeat and being super positive. So we would bring these kids in the assemblies, and the elementary kids are just in awe of these, huge, massive kids and what they're able to do. But the other way too, last year I supported a small group of, it was called like a governor STEM team, and they were in a challenge, and they were trying to they 3D printed a drone. They designed the drone, and then I brought them to a fifth grade class so that they could present the drone, show them how it worked. They could show them how they build it, and it sparked this whole unit that I ended up doing with the fifth grade class in 3D printing. But it was kind of the other way, like where the high school students were in a competition, and they had to create a promo video of how this drone could impact elementary classrooms. So they actually needed the elementary kids for that experience, but the elementary kids benefited from it just as much. Like you said, Matt, your elementary students benefited so much from that experience, but the high school kids did too. They really benefited from that experience as well. So, Laura, we've been talking a lot. So jump in here. What do you want to add to this? What questions do you want to ask us?
Yeah, so I think with the French teacher, like I might not plan like an event exactly with him, but I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. I always create evites for all stakeholders, and so even if my colleagues aren't directly like involved, like with the project or the class event, or the parents aren't directly like volunteering, I still like create that sense of community and like an open invitation, because I feel like if I have those events and they happen more organically and quite frequently during the year, then maybe I'll have like a partnership just kind of naturally start out. And so I feel like just inviting all sorts of different people into your classroom for those big events or even small events, it just like creates a sense of community and like a welcomeness that I feel that as a first year teacher, I was very like the first day, the open house, like maybe a before or back to school event, and then like end of the year. And then I realized like I've taught these students for so long, and I really didn't have a lot of like connection with their families. So I try to be more intentional to have like events and involve all stakeholders as much as I can. That's sustainable too for me as a teacher, but a lot of parents will email like, "Thank you for always inviting us. Like, hey, this time doesn't work, but like I'll come and drop by and see you." So, and be flexible with your times. Like, if you have your a field trip, well, then maybe the next event should be like during the school hour or before or after. So, like, just give different opportunities for different people because all work schedules might not always be your school day. So you have to be a little bit, I guess, flexible. And then I think, using a lot of the digital tools, like we've really used Flipgrid. I have just to send out like messages to parents, and they will like have videos that will surprise the kids. We do the grid pals, and that's obviously for language, but that's like a really cool way that you can connect your classroom. And that's all different contents. They always have like guest speakers about sharks and stuff. So that's not applicable to me, but you can find something on Flipgrid. And that's so easy because you're just clicking that and putting on your smart board. Like you said, the kids, they love it when it's something new. And the last thing I would say, even like a Padlet, I've, sent that out before, and just like, it's just a way to connect like with the community and other teachers and stuff. So you just have to be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, the purpose of this conversation, like I said, is to really narrow it and focus on this topic. And I think I think we did a pretty good job. I think we talked about different ways where we can really tap into the local community, and we can think of that local community as the businesses and the experiences that are available around us, going out to them, bringing them in, leveraging other professionals that work next door to you, down the hallway, across the street, and a different school in your district, and also those student clubs and organizations that are available to benefit both older and younger students. So, to wrap things up here, Laura, why don't you remind everyone where they can get in contact with you, where they can follow you?
Okay, you can follow me on social media, both on Twitter and Instagram at Technology Laura.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I've been following Laura for a little over a year now, and she is definitely an awesome person to
Absolutely.
follow on social media. Mr. Rogers, where can we find you at hovering around the internet?
Yeah, so I have been kind of absent. I'm a great retweeter and not a whole lot of original content, but my Twitter handle is Ed Tech Neighbor, the very poor and unfortunate Mr. Rogers pun. I'll turn it over to Ken. How can we get in contact with you?
Awesome. Mine's real easy. I am at Ken Ehrman. And you can also follow our podcast at Power EDU Up. And you can also find our website at powereduup.com for this show in particular. If you want to check out any show notes, any resources we shared, as well as a direct link to follow Laura, that can be found at powereduup.com/show76. So as you approach next school year, think about what are the ways that you can bring in those local organizations and you can reach out to them. Like Laura said, it's just as easy as an email. It's a phone call. It's just a request for help. It's a request for an experience. And I think you'd be pleasantly surprised how many people would love to give back and support their local schools. So give it a try. Tweet us out. Let us know when you try, what you try, and how it went with your students and how it changed their experiences in your classroom. So thank you both. Thank you, Laura, for joining us as a guest co-host. And Mr. Rogers, why don't you take us on out of here?
As we power down this episode, hopefully this topic left you feeling powered up. It's usually the guest, but we're all three co-hosts. This is a little different. So hopefully your summer is going well and you're charging up to be the best version of yourself and have a great school year. So we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.